Study Session 5. The Social Self. The study session discusses self in the context of self-esteem and self-concept. It is our self-perception that shapes the way we react within our self-esteem. Self-esteem being the amount of relative value we attach to ourselves. Also, it is what, who, where, and how we think we are in any given situation. When you have studied this session, you should be able to describe the concept of self and its social perception, point out the foundation of self-concept, and highlight the forms and respective functions of self-knowledge. The self is not a new term per se, but it is a word we are all familiar with. Each of us has a sense of awareness, of being separate from both our physical and social environments. Each of us has a concept of me, I, we, they, and us, with which we make references. It is our self-perception that shapes the way we react within our self-esteem. Self-esteem being the amount of relative value we attach to ourselves. It is what, who, where, and how we think we are in any given situation. For example, I may see myself as a traditional chief, and as such comport myself as a traditional chief by exercising a lot of restraint in the face of great provocation in a communal land dispute, a situation which another person might have reacted too aggressively. Because of the higher value the community and myself place on what I am, that is a chief, I try as much as possible to maintain that esteem placed on me by myself and the community through my position. Again, where an action is required of me, I may see such as a test of competence in my ability, and depending on my self-esteem, I may or may not oblige such a request. Self-esteem is learned from others and becomes a reflection of how others regard us, or more accurately, the value we think others attach to us as persons. Foundations to sense of self-concept. There are several different foundations of the sense of self or self-concept. The self originates in part from biologically based dispositions inherited from parents as well as from family birth order. Firstborns tend to be more assertive and achievement-oriented. Laterborns tend to be more open to experience and cooperative. The self is shaped by the social context, with people using social comparison to learn about their own abilities, attitudes, and personal traits. According to the distinctiveness hypothesis, people in Western cultures tend to define themselves according to what is unique about themselves compared to others in the social context. The self is profoundly shaped by whether people live in independent or interdependent cultures. Gender also affects how people define themselves, with women generally emphasizing their relationships and defining themselves in an interdependent way, and men generally emphasizing their uniqueness and construing themselves in an independent way. Forms and functions of self-knowledge. There are several forms and functions of self-knowledge. Self-knowledge can take the form of beliefs, images, memories, and stories we tell about our lives. This self-knowledge helps guide construal of social information through memories and self-schemas. typically reinforcing pre-existing beliefs about the self. Self-knowledge embodies cultural and moral standards, and it motivates appropriate behavior. Self-discrepancy theory investigates how people compare their actual selves to their ideal and odd selves. Self-knowledge varies across cultures. In independent cultures, people use their self-knowledge as standards in judging others. They tend to have unrealistically positive beliefs about themselves, an illusion of control, and unrealistic optimism, which all enhance their sense of well-being. In interdependent cultures, other people, rather than the self, serve as standards for social judgment, and there is less evidence of self-illusions. There are two kinds of self-esteem. Trait self-esteem, which tends to be a stable part of identity, and state self-esteem, which changes according to different contextual factors, such as personal failure or the loss of a beloved sports team. The motivation to have elevated self-esteem guides the formation of friendships that allow one to engage in favorable social comparisons, and esteem-enhancing pride taken in a friend's successes. Self-esteem is more important and elevated in the Western world than in East Asian cultures. There are periods of high self-esteem, and studies have linked various forms of antisocial behavior with narcissistic levels of self-esteem. The social self is concerned with how we live and interact with others in our social environment. It is our concept of social self that determines who to live with, where to live, who to associate with, and so on. It shows our concern about how we want others to view us and how we see or want to see others. The reaction of others is more significant in the formation of social self. In the micro sense, the image that you're belonging to, say a social club, dictates is what you tend to live with. So also, at a cultural level, such as your socio-economic status, cultural or ethnic group, educational attainment group, all determine your social self conceptualization. In fact, social self is a consequence of expectation from others. For example, if people think of you as a millionaire, you tend to behave like one. If people see you as a role model, you tend to live up to their expectations. Social self is made up of labels assigned by others and self-imposed. Self-presentation theory considers the self to be a dramatic performer in the public realm. People seek to create and maintain a favorable public impression of themselves. Face refers to what people want others to think they are. Researchers now distinguish between private and public self-consciousness. They have shown that people engage in self-monitoring to ensure that their behavior fits the demands of the social context. People protect their public self through self-handicapping behaviors, which are self-defeating behaviors that can explain away possible failure. Face concerns and self-presentation shape social communication. On-record communication is direct. Off-record communication, like joking and teasing, is indirect and subtle. Study session summary. Self, as a term, has been explained in the context of self-esteem and self-concept in this study session. Individual's self-perception shapes the way he or she reacts within his or her self-esteem. Self-esteem being the amount of relative value we attach to ourselves. Some of the concepts identified with the self were also discussed. We have now come to the end of study session 5. Thank you for listening.